Good day. Welcome to another lesson on our Super Dealmaker Entrepreneurship Master Program. Today we're looking at the skills program, supply chain management, and we're looking at the module sourcing, strategic sourcing. So far, we've looked at the case studies that we do on our programs. We looked at the McDonald's case study on how they source their goods and services. We looked at AEY in terms of sourcing, because AEY is more about tenderpreneurship, which is exactly about sourcing. And then we looked at the Auckland A's in terms of how they were sourcing their players and they were trading players and all that. And we looked at the other module that we looked at is on the demand management. And there we've highlighted that it's important for entrepreneurs to understand the demand from their customers, because that's where everything starts. You want to service the customers. A business or an organization is set up to provide either a service, goods and services to customers. So the operations or even the supply chain as a whole is driven by customers, the demand from customers. So we looked at the demand management, and we've indicated that it's critical for entrepreneurs to understand the demand from their customers. What are they looking for? What are they buying? When are they buying? How are they buying? And we also looked at the analysis of the trends to say, as an entrepreneur or as a business manager or unit manager, depending on your position, you need to understand the trends in your sector. What's happening in your sector? What can you do to take advantage of what's happening in your sector? Because with the demand side, you need to know what the customers are looking for and what the customers are buying and where are the trends going, because you might end up sourcing things that the customers are not buying. And if you source things that are not required by customers, then it means you will not be running a profitable organization. So it's important for you as an entrepreneur to make sure that you understand the trends that are going on in the industry, so that you can ascertain or come up with the demand or the units or the quantities that are required by customers, so that you'll be able to focus, you'll be able to implement your strategic planning, because you can't plan without knowing what your customers are looking for. You have set up the business for customers, to service customers. So you need to know the demand from customers. And the other thing that we looked at under the demand management, we looked at the understanding of the economic factors. What's happening in the economy? Who's buying what? What's moving? Where the economy is the area that you have set up. What are the economic conditions? Do your customers have money to buy? So it's important for entrepreneurs or business managers to understand the economic trend, to understand the buying patterns from their customers and the industry, what's going on in the country, in the area that they are operating in. And then once you understand the demand, you know what will be required, how do your customers require certain things. Now it brings us to our topic for today, or the module for today, which is strategic sourcing. I always say that I tell entrepreneurs and business managers to say, look, supply chain, that's where money is made, right? Yes, you might be providing a unique product and services or interesting product and services, but if you don't have your supply chain on lock, then you might not be profitable. Meaning, if you don't analyze your demand, you don't know what your customers are looking for, you'll buy things that your customers are not will not buy. If you don't source from the right suppliers at the right price, right quantities, then you might make your customers unhappy, because the quality might not be right, the pricing might not be right, and your customers might not buy, and your competitors will eat you alive if you don't source the right product at the right price, right quantities. So sourcing then becomes very, very important. You can lose a lot of money for not sourcing correctly. And as well as if, like, you're servicing the government market, if you don't source from the right suppliers, or if you are servicing large companies, if you are in retail, to be specific, where you're just buying things and supplying to your customers. If you don't source at the right price, that means you will have thin margins for you to remain competitive. So you find that in the space, you're competing with other players. And if they have their sourcing in order, they're sourcing properly and they're strategic in their sourcing, you might find that for you to be competitive, you need to cut your margins. And you find that they are sourcing efficiently, so they're still having healthy margins. But for you to be competitive, you might have thin margins. And that it's a recipe for disaster. So sourcing becomes very, very critical. It's a critical component of any operation. It doesn't matter if you are in services, it doesn't matter if you are servicing government, it doesn't matter if you are manufacturing. Sourcing needs to be on point for you to be competitive. That's where the main, okay, I know I'm saying the whole supply chain is critical, but on the sourcing, that's where the money is. That's where a lot of SMEs are leaving money on the table because they're not strategic about their sourcing. They're just buying from whoever that they can buy where it's available. They don't go in detail in terms of understanding the impact and then finding out the best way to source so that they can maximize their profit. So if you're in retail, obviously sourcing now it becomes key, because who are you going to sell expensive goods and product to? Who are you going to sell to if you are buying fake products, or you don't buy the quality products, or you buy rotten products, or you buy expired goods and all those things? So you need to make sure that your sourcing is operating efficiently for you to be competitive out there. So if you are in retail, but now I'm just giving an example of retail, but any other sector for that matter. Even if you are in services, let's say you are a consultant, you're doing consulting services. In terms of the services that you provide, the research that you conduct. Let's say they ask you to do a business plan, right? You need to source research. You need to source data. So how you source your data, it will determine the quality of the product that you're going to produce at the end of the day. It will be key to a customer deciding if they're happy with your service or not, or it will decide if the funding institution funds that project. It will depend on the quality of the data, and the quality of the data, it depends where you're sourcing it, how you're sourcing it, right? Are you sourcing it from a reliable source? So sourcing is not only for a manufacturing concern, it also affects services. If, let's say we're in training, for us to provide training, we need to facilitate. We need facilitators, right? Our model is that we enter into service level agreement with facilitators, and they come and facilitate for that specific program, and off they go. That's how we operate, so that we don't have unnecessary overhead, because we're a small business. So how we source the facilitators, it will ultimately decide on the quality of the training that we provide, right? So if we get inexperienced or ill-prepared and all those things, and unprofessional facilitators, then that means the course that we'll be facilitating, it will be of poor quality. Or it will be unprofessional, where the facilitator doesn't facilitate on time, the classes are always late, or they don't come, they don't pitch, and all those things. And that will affect the reputation of our organization. So sourcing will always have a massive impact on organizations, not only on, because when you look at the sourcing, generally you think maybe a retail sector or manufacturing sector. No, also services, they get really affected, and it plays a very critical role in making sure that the business it's efficient in its operation. And depending on where you're sourcing your product, right, it might make a difference. Because if you source from unreliable suppliers, you might not get your products and services on time. Then it will affect your supply chain processes, like in terms of your customers. Customers might be unhappy with you, or you might source things expensively, and then you might not be able to pass that price to your customers, and it means customers might not buy from you, or they might buy limited products, and your product might get obsolete or get rotten, or other things get stolen if they are in a warehouse for a long time. So a lot of things can happen if you don't have your sourcing right. And if you are in retail, sourcing, actually retail is about sourcing, right? You need to be able to source from the right producer at the right price, at the right quantities. That's what will make your business work. And I keep on giving the example of using the large retailers, right? And I've said earlier that large retailers, they're just one big supply chain process, right? Because they just have to take goods from one person or one organization, which is the producer, to the consumer. That's all that they're doing. So in between, they are making money in between. The price that the consumer pays and the price that they pay to the producer, they are just making their margins there. Yes, they have to put up the building, they have to hire employees to do this process, but that's all that they are doing. They're making the money between the line, between production and consumption. That's where they're making the money, and it's generally where supply chain space where they are operating. And for them to be sustainable, yes, there's demand side, which retailers generally are selling things that are on demand, food, cleaning stuff, and things like that. So the demand side generally it's on lock, but they still have to do spade work, feasibilities, and all that to see that the demand side is on lock. But the key thing is the sourcing. They are able to source at the right prices, right quantities from right suppliers. That's what makes the difference. And as I said earlier, to say our the spaza shop market, more especially the local retailers, right? They are failing or they are struggling because of the sourcing. Yes, the demand is still there. Maybe they don't analyze the demand as they should. They're buying products that they shouldn't be buying, and they're buying products that are not moving. We can't deny that. That's one of the problems. Okay, they actually have big problems, but one of the key problem is the sourcing, right? Because if you don't source at the right price, then you can't sell at the right price. Because the retail market, more especially the spaza shops, the grocery market, it's highly competitive. There's nothing unique about selling tin fish and bread. There's nothing special about it. You're not selling anything special. But the main thing is, can you sell it at the right price? That's what it comes to. Yes, there might be issue of service. There might be issue of maybe the community, the place where you put your spaza shop. But what is ultimately a key for the consumer is, are you selling the right quality product at the right price? Because generally, even if you are servicing the low end, mostly they are worried about the price. Yes, obviously you can't sell them things that are going to kill them, or the things that are counterfeit, but can you sell them at the right price? Because anyone can set up a spaza shop. There's nothing complicated about it. Just need a few bucks, and then you set up a spaza shop and you can start competing. So if you don't have your sourcing right, then it becomes a challenge because you can't compete. Now, we're talking about the spaza shop, but as well as even if you are providing service, if you can source good employees to provide service on your behalf, you are taking the water, even for services. And even if you are manufacturing, if you can source the right quality raw materials, then the end product becomes something else, and it will negatively affect your operations and your profit and all that. And if you can source at the right price, your end product becomes very, very expensive. and the customers will not be willing to pay for expensive products if they can get the cheaper product in the market. So sourcing is key to all the sectors. Doesn't matter if it's service or it's mining or whatever it is, because you need to source the raw product or the resources that you're going to use to produce whatever you're producing. So you must source them somewhere. Well, unless you're producing them, we're producing everything, but there's no, I don't know if any business that it doesn't source externally certain resources or certain inputs into their operation. So you have, as a business, you have to source something from outside. Okay, unless if maybe you are a sole consultant, you don't have, but you still have to source certain things, information. You need to source the app, the accounting system. If you are an accountant, if you are doing business plans, you still have to source your data that you're gonna use in deciding or assessing the viability of a venture. So each and every business has to source something somewhere. Or are you paying for it? It becomes maybe a different story. Now, going back to the spaza shop or the retail environment, and as I said, that businesses in that space, they are really, really struggling because they can't compete, they can't source. So what happens is the large retailers, they've nailed the sourcing. They've built scaled businesses which have now power over the suppliers. Remember, with sourcing, it's either the supplier has power over you as a customer, or you as a customer have power over the supplier. So when you are sourcing, you need to know your place. Where are you? Are you a price taker? Meaning, what the supplier tells you the price is, you just have to accept that price. You don't have the negotiating power because you don't have that economic of scale where if you move your business to another supplier, they will feel the impact. You are too small. But with the large retailers, they're just too big. So they are so big that they will influence the prices that they get the product from the manufacturers. So what they do, because they have the muscles, they can negotiate better prices. That's why your large retailers can sell products cheaper than the small players, because they have the muscles to go negotiate. And you also get the foreign traders, right, in our communities, and they're doing well. They're killing the local traders. How? Okay, there are many things. Some, it might be that they're selling fake products, which they can sell it cheaper. They're selling counterfeits. They sell it cheaper, so local players, they're selling genuine products, so the pricing is different. And as well as they're not paying tax. So in terms of the VAT and all those things, because they are foreigners and all that. I mean, 14% in retail, it's a massive percentage. Probably it's what you can make to run a successful spaza shop is when you're making averagely 15% from the goods and services that you are selling. So if you're competing with someone who's not paying tax, who sleeps in the shop that they're operating in, it makes it difficult for local spaza shop to compete. But the main, that's maybe it's another, those are other advantages that the foreign retailers have over the local ones. But the main one that I have, and I believe is the main cause, is on the sourcing. What the foreign traders are doing, they are buying in bulk, they buy together. You find that they have different spaza shops in different areas. And what they do, they consolidate their buying and they buy on bulk. So once they consolidate the money, they are able to go negotiate the prices. And also they establish what is called buying groups, where they are buying, the buying groups, they consolidate all the orders from their customers and they approach the manufacturers as one entity. Now, how they approach it is now they have power to negotiate the price with the manufacturer. Because Instead of you going, you have your 100 rand, you want to go buy maybe potatoes. What power do you have to negotiate with the supplier? You can go to the source all you want. You can go to the manufacturer all you want. But you're coming with 100 rand. The manufacturer wouldn't care about you. But if you have a buying group, you have those 100 rands, like it's 1,000 of you or 100,000 of you guys buying the same thing. When you go to a manufacturer, you're going as a one entity. I'm buying for 10 million rand. What discount can you give me? Compared to a local person who says I'm buying for 100 rand, what discount can you give me? So you are unlikely to get a discount from that point because you don't have the scale to negotiate. So one thing is, when you're doing strategic sourcing, try to build partnerships within your sector to see how can we source better to be competitive. Because sometimes sourcing is not about how efficient, how are you doing it on your own. You can't do it on your own. You don't have the capacity to do it. And the other problem is that as small businesses, we operate in silos, right? You find that you have 10 spaza shops in one community. But when they are sourcing, each spaza shop, they go to town to go buy their stuff. So they're using petrol and all that to go. And even when they come back, you find the van is not even, or the truck is not even full. Instead, if they had communicated and clubbed together, not sharing anything, I want this, you want that, you want that, they collect the money, they send one truck to go buy. They would have saved, each and every one would have saved on the petrol and the money that they would have went to buy with. So in that, then that saving, they can put it back into the customer's pocket. It can make them more competitive. But because they are not strategic in how they are sourcing their products, they're operating in silos, then they will spend more than they should in sourcing the product. So instead of saving on the transport cost, and even if they club together, if they are going to certain stores, they can still negotiate, because it's the 10 of you, you are buying for 10,000 rand each, it's 100,000. If you walk into maybe a wholesaler to say, look, we have 100,000, we would like to negotiate a discount. A wholesaler will listen. Rather than I have 1,000 rand, I want to negotiate, don't waste my time. Can negotiate with 1,000 worth of products. So in the strategic sourcing, it's not only about finding the right manufacturer, but it also involves building strategic relationships in your sector that you're operating in. And it's not about buying directly from the manufacturer, because sometimes even buying directly from the manufacturer, you find that it could be even more expensive than buying from the buying group. You have different buying groups in the retail sector. Because they get the discount, they tend to get their product a little bit cheaper than they would get if they went directly to producer. So buying directly from manufacturer is not always a positive or an advantage. It might be even a disadvantage, because most of the time, small businesses, they don't have scale. So without the economies of scale, you don't have influence on the prices that you get, right? That's one disadvantage. The second thing is, because you're buying in small quantities, the cost of sourcing becomes expensive. Let's say now you are in Limpopo, you need to source products from Gauteng. Right. If you are sourcing products worth 10,000 rand, you have to drive to Gauteng, come back. Let's say maybe in petrol and all those things, maybe spend 2,000 rand. And you are buying 10,000 rand worth of stock. So you already added 20% of traveling cost. And that now you need to charge back to the customer. Then now it doesn't make you competitive. But if you're going to Gauteng, you're buying products worth 100,000. Yes, you're still adding 2,000, but instead of it being 20%, of what you buy, if you are buying using 100,000, then it becomes 2%. You only added 2% cost to the things that you bought. So finding the best way to buy, given the limited scale, it also helps you to source cheaper. Buy in bulk. Find other people that you can club with if there are certain things that you are buying together. So that when you go to buy, it doesn't cost you much. Like cost per product is not as expensive as it would have been if you went by yourself. So you make sure that you build strategic relationship in how you source your products, right? And then as well as sometimes when you're sourcing, they give you discounts. Say if you buy so many quantities or whatever, so if you buy for so much, we give you maybe 10% discount. But you forget that you're giving me this discount, but I don't have demand for this product. So it will take me 6 months to sell. So that discount that you gave me, ultimately it becomes a loss to me because I'll have product on my shelf that I'm not turning over, that are just sitting there. And I could have bought even at the highest price, but I'll convert those products quicker. I'll end up even making that discount that you are offering me. So don't buy in bulk for the sake of buying in bulk because somebody's giving you 10%. You need to look at your demand. You buy in bulk if it works for your business, if you have demand for those products. So sourcing is not as straightforward as going to the wholesaler or going to the market and just sourcing the product or advertising that I need facilitators. It's a little bit involved. You need to be strategic and intentional about it. You need to make sure that when you're doing your sourcing, you have systems in place that you are using to source. You don't just go out and say, I need this. I need a consultant. You just go out and source a consultant without putting proper systems in place. Okay, so we looked at the sourcing from maybe the retail side. No? The focus has been on the retail side, but I also have to look at even on the manufacturing side. Sourcing becomes very, very important because it decides if you are competitive or not. It's key. It will decide if your business is profitable or not. So I remember in my previous life where we're looking at a business that is doing corrugated sheets. The concept sounded promising because the entrepreneurs wanted to set up a roof sheet manufacturing business somewhere. So in that area, there was no producer. No one was producing corrugated sheets. Everyone was importing. Okay, then from there, it sounds like it's promising. It's something that can be done. And then what happened is when you start doing the due diligence, right, you realize that to source the raw material, it was more expensive than the final product. So the final product, the roof sheet, was cheaper in the hardwares around the area than the raw material that these entrepreneurs were supposed to buy. Remember, they were still supposed to go and process the raw material. They have to buy a massive machine to process the raw steel into the roof sheet. So if you can't compete by just the raw material alone, you buying the raw material because they were small, they didn't have the scale, want to negotiate. But okay, I don't know how that the roof sheets come into the country. It seems like there's something dodgy going down there. But what I'm saying is, for these small entrepreneurs, they saw what they thought it was a business opportunity. But when you look closely to say, where are you going to source your raw material? Then the business fell apart. The business case couldn't stand the scrutiny. Because sourcing it locally, the raw roof sheet was costing more than the final product. So you see that already there's something wrong. And they explored different options, right? To say, okay, maybe locally the raw material is more expensive. Let's look at sourcing from abroad, because that's part of sourcing strategies. You look at, can I get the product locally compared to if I import it? Can I import it cheaper? Because there are certain things that you can import cheaper than buying the raw material local. It's like in the textile industry. Raw materials produced locally, it costs more than final product that are imported from China. The last time we checked, you can buy raw material locally unless if you are designing or you are manufacturing high-end, sophisticated products. Then you can source locally because the pricing will be different. But if you are the run-of-the-mill textile business where you are sewing jeans that you're going to put in affordable stores, then it doesn't make sense for you to source raw material locally. It's not viable for you to source raw material locally. And that's like, so it's similar to the roof sheet guys. Then they looked at the options, because as an entrepreneur, when it comes to sourcing, you need to make sure that you look at different options. So they looked at the option to say, what if we import? It's an option. They looked at different options. I think the best price was coming from, was it China or India? One of the two. Now, the quantity didn't make sense, because for them to get the raw material at the price that makes sense for them to set up a manufacturing plant, the quantities were just crazy. It was going to take them 4 years to process those quantities. Like, I don't know, the quantity that gave them a very good discount, it was going to take them, based on the demand, it was going to take them 4 years to process. If they wanted to buy the raw material at a good price that will make their business profitable, that means they had to buy the quantity for 4 years, given the limitation of their production plant. So that now doesn't make sense. You buy quantities that it will take you 4 years to process. I mean, it doesn't make business sense. So that's where now, so you can see sourcing of inputs or sourcing of raw material become even more critical for a manufacturing business. You need to make sure that you are able to source your input at affordable prices. That will translate in you being competitive in the market price-wise, because it's all about the price. Yes, you might be selling, as I said, that maybe if you are in a textile where you are making something unique, clothing, whatever, people are willing to pay premium for your product, then sourcing doesn't become an issue, because the margin, you will be able to add sufficient margin on top of the cost price that will make your venture still viable, right? So sourcing is key. It's what causes many businesses to fail, right? And maybe on another example, I've looked at one example, like there was a drive in terms of supporting local bakeries, right, where the Department of Small Business is giving grants and all those things. So yes, it's a good noble initiative, but when you look at it closely, yes, if you give them grants, they will operate. But if you start looking at it closely to say, will they ever be sustainable? Doesn't matter, you buy them equipment for free and you give them the startup material for free. Ne? That business is still not viable. Why? Because they can't source the raw material at an affordable price to be able to compete with other bakeries that are supplying bread in communities. Right. So if you look at it, the bread that they were producing, the cost-wise, before you even looked at the cost of electricity, cost of labor and all those, they were already producing at around 9 rand. So that's the cost of bread that other bakeries, large bakeries, are able to deliver the bread at in local communities. So the finished product in the community, it costs them close to or not even close, but more than the cost of producing that bread for that bakery was more than the selling price in the market. And what was the problem? The sourcing. They didn't have scale to source sufficient, flour, because that's the main ingredient that goes into making the bread. So their flour was costing them an arm and a leg. And it's because they were buying from the wholesalers. And because there's nothing special about bread. I mean, you're not eating anything special. It's just bread. So you are competing with another bread. It's just based on the price. You're not making maybe cakes that have fancy things that you can add better margins, but you're just selling bread. So if you can source at the right price, then you can't sell at the right price. So the business now it was not viable, unless if they put up their own silo where the manufacturers or the producers will come deliver directly to them. Yes, it's an option, but given the sizes of their ovens and their mixers, they can't afford to have a silo, because the capacity for them to put up a silo, it will mean they have to buy the raw material that they're going to use over 6 months. Meaning they will have to put a lot of money down that they will not be using over 6 months. And it's not efficient, because you will have the money sitting there not being utilized. You'll have stock that's sitting there without not being utilized. And what does it mean? It means that stock can be, get rotten, something can happen to the stock, you're running that risk. It can be stolen, you can lose it because you're keeping it around. And then you have your stock in the warehouse, you are not turning the money. You're not making money out of it. You're only going to make money out of it in 6 months' time, which now it makes that business not viable, not efficient, the strategy not efficient. The equipments are there, but they can't produce the bread at the right price that will make that operation sustainable. So sometimes you can look at a business, there is demand for the product. You can set up the operations. You have the money to set up the operations, but can you source the raw material at a price that will make it reasonable for you to operate in that market? Can you source at reasonable price to make you competitive? So now I gave you different sectors on the sourcing problem to say, please apply your mind on the sourcing. Can you source the raw materials? Can you source the labor? If you are in consulting, can you source the skill that is required for you to set up this operation? So I gave you like a wide range of industries that I've exposed to that are failing because they can't source correctly. They don't have either they don't have capacity, or they don't have the necessary skills to source, or they can't find the right suppliers. It's similar like the grower market, the chicken market. Yes, people eat chickens every day, right? But there are many smallholder farmers that are failing, that are in the broiler market. One is because of the dumping from your Brazil and the US. They're dumping a lot of chickens in South Africa. They're dumping them at cost per kg that is lower than the chicken that is produced locally. So now you can say, no, I'll buy one-day chicks, I'll buy feed, I'll feed these chickens, and then I'll sell them to the market. The cost of you buying the chicken, feeding them, you are local. That cost is more than the cost of those chickens that are being dumped from your Brazil and the USA. They sell them at a cheaper cost per kg than the locally produced. Yes, there could be a market for fresh chicken, because your chickens will be a little bit fresh. But the bigger market is looking at cheap product that they can buy. So local smallholder farmers, they are struggling to compete with imports. So Then what happens? The retail market, they're just sourcing from chickens from Brazil or wherever. Or some, they just source them and repackage them in their brand and they sell them. It's cheaper to do it that way than you saying you are producing local chickens. Because the cost to produce local chicken per kg is more than the cost of importing it. So instead of trying to be fancy to say you are setting up a local manufactured chicken operation, you rather find how can I source this product from Brazil? You source them, they land here cheaper, then you go into the market and you service the market. You don't have the stress of growing the chickens, managing the diseases, making sure that they have enough heat and all those things, make sure that you feed them the right things, you give them medication. You don't have that stress. After that stress, you still come out at the cost that is more than an imported chicken. So you might as well import the chicken and make sure that you make money out of it without the necessary stress of growing the chicken and all those things. So sourcing becomes a cornerstone of how you structure your business. Will you be able to source the raw material to make your business more efficient? Will you be able to source the labor if you are a consultant? Or will you be able to source the end product to be able to sell to your customers at a reasonable price if you are in retail? So each and every business is around sourcing. Make sure that you are able to source the right product, at the right price, in the right quantities. That's what will make your business. Make sure that you're able to source. If it's labor, do you have people with that necessary skill to be able to implement your project? Right. It's like maybe if you want to set up an IT hub, then you go to a rural place and you're trying to set up. Just saying that it's like me, this year I want to set up a software development company. Let's say you go to some rural areas in KZN or whatever the province, then you set it up there. So the challenge is you might struggle to source locally, to source the developers. You might, now because we're in a virtual environment, maybe you might be able to have developers, even if they're not from the area, to work virtually. But if you wanted them to be physically at the company, then you wouldn't be able to source them. So your business might fail because you can't source programmers or sufficient enough programmers from your area. Yes, maybe you might train them and all that. But I'm just giving an example to say there are certain sectors that you might need a certain skill to operate. And you must, before you set up your operation, you must check if you will be able to get that skill from the area that you want to operate from. So it's very important. All I'm saying is, please make sure that you understand where you're going to source your products. Right. If you need raw material, if you are manufacturing, make sure that you source from, you have the source and the source is reasonable. If you are sourcing the right product, make sure that you build the necessary networks, build necessary relationship that will help you source products at a reasonable price, because that's what makes or breaks your business. Where are you sourcing your product? Are the product available? Can you source them at the right price? Can you source them at the right quality and quantity for that matter? So sourcing is the cornerstone of an operation, right? You can have demand, you can have the infrastructure to execute. As I'm saying, like you are a smallholder farmer, you have farm, what do you call it, chicken houses. You have the demand out there, people are eating chicken. But for you to produce that chicken, it costs you more than the price of the chickens that are out there in the market. So you need to find a way to say, how do I source my chicken? Do I buy ready-made chickens and just sell the chickens if you really love the chicken industry? Or you find the best way to grow your chickens so that the cost of growing those chickens is still less than them, or is competitive to the price of those chickens in the market. So it's very, very important. Sourcing is one of the key components. And in my experience, I've dealt with so many entrepreneurs in my lifetime. And one of the things that factors that have been ignored is the sourcing. They put up the infrastructure. Remember as well, even the funding institutions, right? Like your TFIs and all that, when they do due diligence, yes, they might look at the sourcing if it becomes a clear risk. But sometimes the sourcing it's ignored. The main thing that is they're focusing on, it might be on the demand. Do you have demand for your product? And then they look at if you have the necessary skills to execute the project. Then you might get funding, and to only realize that the sourcing is the problem. You can't get certain things. And if you can't get those things, then your project might fail. And the funding institution, if it doesn't have the necessary skills to see that you might not be able to source certain products, then your project might fail, and you might be owing people a lot of money. So as you're planning your project, make sure that you understand the sourcing. If it's an existing business, analyze your sourcing processes. Make sure that you have system in place to source correctly, to source appropriate products, to source the right quantities. Don't just buy because there's discount, you buy as much as you can. So, and then sometimes even the sourcing it becomes different, because I remember in my previous life, we were looking at a potato project somewhere here in Limpopo. Then the challenge was, there is a project, there of takes agreements in place. The farm is there. The equipment is available. Okay, the quotation for equipment is available. The market is secured. The farm is there. Everything is there. And then another TFI was putting in the equity in the business. They were already committed to say, we'll put equity in the business. Then this institution, because they had the expertise to understand the sector, they looked at the water. They say, wait a minute. Yes, you have a borehole, but the capacity of the borehole will not be able to run the factory because it needed a lot of water. So the borehole capacity didn't have the capacity to run the factory. And the project fell apart from that point only, to say where they are, okay, they're not within the municipality water infrastructure, so they couldn't get the water from the municipality. And remember, in South Africa, you don't just sink a borehole. Okay, in residential places, yes, you can. But for commercial use, you need a water license for you to sink a borehole. And knowing our government, the inefficiencies and all that, it might take you forever for you to get the water license. In this case, the challenge was not the borehole. The challenge was the capacity of the water underneath. So there was not sufficient water where they were based to run the plant. But sometimes you might find that you need a certain quantity of water, but you can't get it because for you to sink the borehole, you need the necessary approval. But in this case, that place, that area, didn't have enough water to run the potato plant, to convert them. Remember, they were doing chips and all those things. So they needed a lot of water to wash, to do whatever the process that they needed to follow. And the project fell apart because they can't have enough water. Because water is one of the sources that you need to look at when you're setting up. Can you have access to electricity? Or are you going to source it from municipality or from ESCOM? Okay, no, now we're in load shedding. So now you can't even source enough electricity for you to run your operation. It's part of the sourcing, right? Many businesses are failing because now they can't get sufficient electricity. So where will you get electricity should you be in load shedding? So you need to find what will be the source of your electricity. That's how deep sourcing goes. It's not only sourcing for high level raw materials only, Because sometimes we, in a lot of supply chain trainings that I attend, it's all about raw material, it's all about products and all that. But there are other things that need to be, it might be labor, it might be electricity, it might be water, in this case of the potato project. So there's different source strategies that you need to put in place. You need to understand all the inputs that you're gonna need for you to meet the demand. Once you understand all the inputs that you're gonna need, where am I going to get these inputs? That's one, the first question. Second question, how much do I have to pay for these inputs? Does this still make sense at the price that I'm gonna sell for? The cost of these inputs, does it make sense for me to start the operation? Might not make sense, because the cost, as I told you about the corrugated sheet business, the cost might be too high. Or will I be able to source sufficient quantities for me to run the operation? You might not be able to source sufficient quantities, like as I indicated with the potato project. They couldn't source into sufficient water. You can't have enough water. Then it doesn't matter what the situation is. You might have the market, lucrative market as you want. You might have the building infrastructure. You might have the equipment. You might have the people, but you don't have water to run your project. Then you need to come with alternatives. How would you source? Can maybe create an infrastructure where you're sourcing from the neighboring farms and all that. But now that's another cost on its own. To go find a place where you can source the water, it's a cost to the project, and it might not be practical for you to set up that. So sourcing, it can destroy a project. Yes, I might want to set up a spaza shop, but will I be able to source stock at the right price so that I am competitive in terms of the pricing? Maybe I might not be able to, because I don't have the capacity. I don't have the money to go negotiate with the suppliers. Or now, if I'm setting a spaza shop, maybe I might look at locally produced products only. Because I can't source your tin fish, your bread competitively, I might look at unique products that I can sell, that I can source. Then that might give you a competitive advantage. But to be profitable, you need to be strategic, understand the sourcing, understand that you can get the raw material, and how. The strategy is on how. And remember, sourcing it's all about making profit. And establishing a business, you're establishing a business to make profit. It might be a charity, but even charities, they want to set up an operation that is self-sustaining. And even for them to sourcing becomes even important, even if their objective, it might not be to make profit, but they get donor funding. So they need to make sure that every cent that they receive, it goes as far as possible. Then sourcing becomes critical for them to make sure that the little money that they get, they can make an impact on many people as they can. Then it comes to sourcing to say, will they be able to source products or services at a reasonable price for them to be able to achieve their objectives. So sourcing is key, even with government. Remember, they've implemented this tendering system. Okay, I guess it's defeating the purpose. The purpose was competitive bidding. That's the purpose of the government supply chain. So that they invite suppliers to tender for certain projects, right? Their intention was they will be able to get the cheapest, most competent supplier. So now, the way it has gone, actually now government is actually sourcing at double the prices, but that as well has got to do with corruption and all those things. And people have seen that because government is not efficient, they're just overcharging them. And they know government, it doesn't do its own research. So they tend to accept the prices that they're being charged. But the preferential procurement, it was set up to, not preferential, but competitive bidding. as a process. It was set up as government have seen the importance of sourcing. Source from the right person, source at the right price and the right quantities. Even the government is trying. And then if you are running a small business, who are you who's not looking after the function of sourcing? You can't neglect the function of sourcing. And even big corporates, they go out, request for quotations, request for tenders. It's part of the sourcing. They want to source the best price out there so that they remain competitive, so that they are profitable, so that they can provide, they can extract value for money. That's what sourcing is all about. It's all about you as a business being able to source value for money. Be able to meet the demand at using the least cost possible, at the lowest cost possible, while you're meeting the customer demand. So think about your sourcing strategy. Make sure that you are strategic and you are intentional about your sourcing, because that's where the money is made. If you ignore that and you take it for granted, you might fail. Your business might fail because you might not be competitive out there. And what are the type of strategies or processes that are involved in sourcing? Please make sure that you collect as much data as possible about your goods and services, where you're going to source, the suppliers, type of suppliers, local, international, wherever, underwater. Make sure that you have data about that. And then when you're entering into contract, make sure that you negotiate as much as you can so that you end up getting good price. And then the third one, make sure that you do your market research. Understand the market in terms of the demand, what type of things that they are buying, and the quantities and all that. Because without doing the market research, you might not source in a correct way. You might source wrong things that are not demanded by the market. And then if you are sourcing, make sure that you source from a reputable supplier. Or if it's not reputable, test their quality of the product. Make sure that you have mechanism to test the quality of the product. There are certain products that when they leave the factory, they need to be tested and all that. Make sure there's those control measures. Like the farmers, if they're producing maybe, I don't know, puree or whatever it is, that then they need to test those products before they leave the factory, most especially when they're exporting, because they want to know if they're buying the right product, so that if anything happens, they know that they've been tested. So even for you, you might want to source from locally, but make sure that if you're sourcing from the local suppliers, one, they comply with relevant standard. If it's global gap, it's health and safety, if it's SABS, make sure that they comply. And then if there's no system that exists to test their product, make sure you test those products so that you don't get exposed to unnecessary risks. All right. And then as well, consider outsourcing. As I said, that you might want to produce your chickens, but they might not be profitable. Why don't you consider outsourcing and buy them from Brazil or the US, because they are dumping them at cheap prices. So you must not necessarily be something that you have to do. Even if you see that you can't be competitive, you might be forcing the issues of trying to manufacture yourself or produce them yourself. While the market out there, the market is available and you can source from different suppliers and you can still be profitable. So those are the things that you need to consider. And lastly, make sure that you set standards. Going back to what I'm preaching in all my lessons, make sure that you have standards, you have systems in place that you need to follow. Okay, your sourcing function, you must have processes and procedures. You must have standards. You must have put processes so that even if you are not there, let's say, or your buyer is not there, you should know the processes that they're supposed to be following, the processes that they follow to source products. So having systems and procedure is key to making sure that you have a sustainable business, you have a sustainable project, where now it also addresses the business continuity. Because if, let's say, your buyer gets hit by a bus, God forbid, you might not know where they are, where are they buying, what are the prices, and all that. And that can cause your business to fail. So make sure that you have systems in place. I always say systems. Make sure that your sourcing it follow certain systems, which you need to develop a culture of implementing systems, so that even when the business is growing, you make sure that it's growing with systems. Because as you grow, you tend to get busy. So if you don't have proper systems in place, then things will fall on the cracks and you might make mistakes and all that. And as you're growing, then the risks are even higher for you to get into legal troubles and all that. So make sure that you source from the right reputable suppliers. Make sure that you source the right quantities at the right price, depending on the demand from your customers, so that your demand, you will be able to meet the demand. So your sourcing should be able to meet the demand from your customers. So you must be operating at that equilibrium where you are able to source the right product at the right price, at the right quantities, to meet the demand that from your customers. So that's very, very important to say. Sourcing, make sure that you have strategies in place, you understand your industry, you understand your sector, you understand where to source, you do your market research, you negotiate your contract properly, and you collect as much information as you can, so that you're always making informed decisions. I thank you. That was on our sourcing, which is part of our supply chain management skills program. And then this supply chain management program is part of our entrepreneurship masterclass. And then this now, also you can use our Super Dealmaker app. We've developed tools, supply chain management tools that it will make it easier for you to use to develop your supply chain processes, procedures, and then as well as the processes, and it helps you to develop your supply chain plan. So that, because you need to plan, you can't just execute things without having proper plans with objectives. So on Super Dealmaker, now that if you are registered for this skills program, you will be able to access the tools that we've developed for you to make your supply chain process easier, to make your sourcing easier, so that you are able to develop a supply chain and sourcing plan. That's it from me. I thank you and enjoy your day.